Awareness, got it. So you're trying to target some of the developers. So that kind of ties into, well, what exactly is Cosmos and why are you targeting developers?
Right.
So obviously people probably know Cosmos from the viewpoint of Tendermint, which you had mentioned, which I heard about, I think back in 2015, I believe. Heard Jay Quan, right, founder, the rapper, yeah, speak at one of the Bitcoin meetups, early Bitcoin developer meetups, and describe his concept of Tendermint. Maybe you can give a better description than I can. Like, what's the earth-shattering thing about Tendermint, and why the two names? Well,
Yeah.
what is Cosmos? What is Tendermint?
Yeah.
And are there any other names people have to know about within the landscape of this project that are really important?
Yeah, there are lots of names, fortunately or unfortunately, but Tendermint Core is essentially the lower level networking and consensus protocol stack that we've built, and we've modularized it such that you could layer on an application layer on top of the lower level protocol. And so the higher level application layer, the state machine layer, is called the Cosmos SDK. So what we've done is we've built a framework in Go that can plug into Tendermint.
Got
and
it.
so that allows you to build powerful applications that scales to
That
thousands
scale.
of users.
It's a big word that everyone's like scared about. Like, will cryptocurrency scale? You guys have a solution.
A solution,
A
yeah.
solution. Probably, maybe the solution or one of many, because it's looking like a lot of different projects are hopping onto this consensus mechanism.
Yeah, the quality about this consensus mechanism is that it is safety favoring over liveness favoring, and so so we call, in proof of stake, there's primarily two tenets. One being BFT-based, Byzantine fault tolerance-based proof of stake. The other being like longest chain-based proof of stake, like Nakamoto consensus-based proof of stake, where they favor liveness and the chain forks. Whereas in BFT-based proof of stake, the chain does not fork because it is safety favoring.
So this is an interesting trade-off here. So the trade-off being whether or not the chain continues at all costs. It's just going to keep continuing, but you might have a disparity.
Yeah,
at some point in
you would
time.
have reorgs.
Yeah, reorgs, disparity, which is inconvenient during that time when you have a split or a fork. But you hope that it kind of eventually comes together. But then on the other side, you have Byzantine fault tolerance, which favors not going down two different paths at any point in time. But then what's the trade-off in that sense? Is sure, we're never going to go across two different paths, but do we kind of halt time at some point if there's any issues?
You do, yeah, there are liveness faults.
So what's an example of what might be experienced and what would cause a liveness fault? Just describe that situation. This is interesting. Actually, I'm learning a lot by this.
If a third of the validators go offline, then the network halts.
Oh, interesting. And so basically transactions don't go through until more of the validators come online.
Yeah, that's right.
And so a validator, what exactly is a validator on the network?
So you could think of a validator as analogous to a mining pool, and a delegator analogous to an individual miner. So we have...
I see. So you have pools of people come together and help form what effectively turns into a validator.
It's sort of the inverse in that it's usually one entity running a validator business.
Oh, I see.
And then, different people staking tokens
money
to the validator.
To the validator.
And those stakers are called delegators.
And so there's a lot of different proof of stake mechanisms. And yes, there's a lot of people that are haters of proof of stake, lovers of proof of work, and vice versa, whatnot. But there's been a lot of talk of the uniqueness of Tendermint and how it solves proof of stake in a different way. Is there kind of a high level for those of us that aren't super technical, a high level difference in Tendermint's proof of stake versus others?
Yeah. Tendermint tends to be the most mature, production-ready implementation of a BFT proof of stake algorithm.
And it is in production.
It is in production.
And actually, I'd mentioned that there are other projects that are using Tendermint's consensus mechanism. What are some of those? Name the top, 2 or 3 projects that are using this.
Yeah. So Binance Chain uses...
Huge.
Yeah. Binance Chain uses a fork of Tendermint, and Facebook's Libre project is a re-implementation of Tendermint with improvements upon it that Hotstuff created. So VMware Research improved upon the Tendermint consensus protocol, and they tinkered with a few things. I don't know the exact details, but they improved upon Tendermint.
Gory technical little details.
Yeah, and then they implemented Hotstuff. And Libre is based off of Hotstuff. And so Hotstuff was largely research, and Libre actually, so there was...
That's a hell of a name, Hotstuff.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly thought you just said, oh, they just kind of like, came up with some hot stuff. But
Yeah, well,
it's actually an organization?
Well, VMware Research.
It's a research organization of VMware.
Right, and so it was largely done in the context of research, and so there wasn't really any production-ready implementation until Libre actually re-implemented Tendermint and then added the hot stuff on top of it.
On top of it, got it. So you've got we said one major project, Binance Chain, and they're live, they're in production.
Yeah.
They're, from what I saw, doing a ton of transactions and actually getting fairly fast finality on some of their transactions, like sub-second. Is that something that's even expected? Like you can actually get finality in less than a second?
It depends on how you parameterize it and how many validators there are in your network. For Binance Chain, I believe there's like 6 nodes that they run themselves, and so that's why it's a lot faster. For the Kosmos hub, which is running Tendermint in production, we have 100 validators, so it is a little bit slower in that the average block time is about 6.35 seconds or so.
I see, because you've got to go and get that data across more nodes on the network.
Yeah, so
they have to come to agreement.
Yeah, so the trade-off with safety favoring proof of stake protocols like Tendermint is that there's a huge communication overhead with all of the validators.
Got it.
All of the validators need to vote on a block before it gets finalized.
Got it.
Yeah, so it's kind of like the inverse of how proof of work works.
Got it. So coming back to GopherCon, over here in San Diego, and you guys brought the team. What is the goal there for the team from Kosmos? Like, what are you trying to target? What are you trying to get out of it? And how does that tie into what Kosmos is?
So the theory is that we've sort of maximized our presence in the crypto space, and the crypto space is one tiny little niche community in the context of the greater software development community, and we want to tap into the greater software development community.
Got it. So you want people building stuff, or you want people using?
We want people building stuff.
What can people build?
So that users can use the applications that the builders are building.
Got it. So what can people build on Kosmos? Is it like Ethereum? You're looking at like smart contract, dApps, things like that, or does it have a different architecture to enable different use cases?
Yeah, it's a different architecture in that we have provided the framework for any Go developer to run any arbitrary application.
An arbitrary application?
Well, I mean, any sort of application.
Okay.
But so the framework allows you to build your app as its own blockchain. The thesis is that any application that wants to scale past tens of thousands of users are going to want to have their own dedicated chain.
Got it. So this is in stark contrast to the theory, at least of existing smart contract blockchains, where you put all the apps on that blockchain, and maybe they have a token that is necessary for that dApp, but that's still running on that main chain of, like, say, Ethereum or Tron or whatnot. Here, the theory with Kosmos is each app, in order for it to really achieve scale, runs on its own blockchain, and therefore isn't interfering with the throughput of other chains.
Right, so you're not sort of competing with other smart contracts that need throughput on the same chain.
Got it.
So
it's interesting.
Yeah, so for Ethereum, token issuance on a smart contract, it's really optimized for that. Right, so you want lightweight applications. You want to build toys that people could tinker with, and you could have blockchains as a service that Ethereum kind of provides.
Right.
Whereas,
that's true. So, but whereas you were saying with Kosmos.
Yeah, whereas with the Kosmos SDK, you would build your own chain, and then you kind of have to, bootstrap the security with your own validators. Got
it. And so you wouldn't necessarily use the validators that already exist on Kosmos or Kosmos Hub.
Eventually, you would be able to.
Eventually be able to.
Yeah, we haven't implemented that yet, but that is, actively being researched right now.
Imagine if you're building a little like dApp, maybe a social media, your own little crypto kitties, might not want to go and gather a bunch of friends and coworkers to go launch validators for your chain.
Maybe
so being able to leverage the existing security is one of the key things.
That's right. Yeah.
So this is some fairly complex cross-chain communication, multi-chain communication stuff. Maybe I'm going to rewind a bit to what most people do at the beginning of podcasts and like ask, like, where did you get into this from the background point of view? You got you're leading community on a very fairly complex, high-profile project, but where did you come from to lead you there? Like, what brought you interested into this project based on your background? Like, let's start from like beginnings of crypto for you. What was that path and interest level, and how it eventually led to Kosmos?
Yeah.
I know how far back to go, huh?
It goes pretty far back. I first dove into the rabbit hole of money and how our monetary system works, and then I learned about the Fed.
You did?
Yeah, and of course I went down that rabbit hole, and I came out of it with Bitcoin. And so,
as many people do. So
yeah.
Bitcoin, obviously it started for most of us.
Yes,
It's
Bitcoin.
amazing. I remember back in 2016, 2017, I remember there were people that didn't know the word Bitcoin, but they knew the word blockchain.
Really?
It's amazing. I was like, what? You haven't heard of Bitcoin?
Oh, actually, that makes sense.
But yeah, back then.
Yeah.
Back then. Not anymore today. So, okay, so you learned about Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Around what time was that?
That was in November 2014. I remember I went to a club, and
A club, like a nightclub?
Yeah.
You learned about Bitcoin at a nightclub.
I mean,
I don't hear that too often.
Yes, yeah. I went to meet up with one of my friends, and at that time he was mining Bitcoin, and he was telling me about this. I was asking him. I'm like, I just quit I'm about to quit my job, and
what were you doing at the time?
I was working at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
Very cool.
And
You're a rocket scientist?
Unfortunately not, just an astronaut. No, I'm just
Just an
kidding. No. I was writing proposals in the business sector.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
You were surrounded by astronauts.
Rocket
scientists.
with rocket scientists and engineers mostly.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
physicists.
So you were in a heavy science-based industry.
Yeah.
Discovered Bitcoin at a nightclub of all places.
Yeah, with my miner friend.
With your miner friend. Was minor.
Miner.
So he mined. He wasn't
Yeah,
just
he was
small.
mining Bitcoins
But he was a big
at
friend.
the time. He
But
was a major friend.
A major friend that was a
major
minor friend.
He was a major friend because he.
So mining Bitcoin at the time, and where'd it go from there?
So I asked him, what's a good passive investment that, I could get into because I'm going to be traveling and not earning any income for a long time. He's like, well, you should buy some Bitcoins.
Simple as that.
Because at that time, Bitcoin had just hit all-time high of I think it was like $1,200, and then it went down. So when I bought into it, it was like $600.
Oh my God! Lucky you came in. You said it was 2014.
It was 2014, yeah.
End near
And
middle.
near the end
beginning?
of 2014.
Oh, perfect, sweet time. You
Yeah.
kind of didn't have to deal with the downward grunge of all of beginning of 2014 hack of Mount Gox. You kind of catch it when everyone's not talking about it, which is the sweet spot.
That was, yeah.
Got it. So accumulating right in 2014, and what was the path going forward from just accumulating to getting involved in the industry, and eventually connecting with kind of the Kosmos team, or maybe other projects? I'm not sure what other projects you might have been involved with before then. What was that path?
Yeah. So actually, when my friend who was mining Bitcoin told me about it, he started talking about the technicals, talking about UTXOs and how those work, and just immediately, for some reason, that was what drew me in.
UTXOs is what drew you in.
For some reason.
I was like, Bitcoin in a nightclub, and UTXOs is what brought you in.
Yeah, we were sitting down in a nightclub, and we weren't paying attention to what was going on. He was teaching me about UTXOs, and I was like, oh my God.
That's what you talk to girls about in nightclubs.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay, and so that drove it down the rabbit hole. Started acquiring crypto. You mentioned that you were not going to be earning any income and traveling.
Yeah, so I was basically on a sabbatical, and then I needed some way to earn passive income, and I made a bet on Bitcoin and started accumulating at that time, and turns out not to be a bad bet. And so I knew that this was something that I was really interested in, and so I started building up the community in Bali.
Bali, cool.
Yeah, I landed in Bali, and at that time, I met with a community there of expats, and we were trying to turn Bali into what's called the Bit Islands Project. And the Bit Islands Project is essentially this campaign where we wanted any tourist to come, land in Bali, not have to exchange your fiat.
Just pay Bitcoin everywhere.
We didn't want you to exchange your dollars into rupiah. You could just, land, use Bitcoin, and that would be the Bit Islands project.
Yeah, it's like the little dream. I've been a big fan of actually being able to use crypto in day to day and turn it into an active payment currency and be able to travel with it.
Yeah.
As we know, that kind of didn't come to as much fruition, at least not in prior years as we had hoped. Kind of still in the speculation era, but there's still hope. We think it's at some point we'll be there.
Maybe. I mean, if Bitcoin ever got bigger blocks, I don't. I mean, that's a whole can of worms that I do not want to open. But anyway,
if ever scaling solutions were to solve it in one way, shape, or form, that's what I usually like to think.
Yeah, I think a simple solution would just to implement bigger blocks. I know a lot of people would disagree with me about that, but I mean,
this is a big blocker right here.
I mean, I'm not a big blocker, right? I'm not a big blocker. 2 megabyte blocks is not that big. Yeah,
mediumer. That doesn't exist.
Practical blocker.
Yeah. Oh, practical blocker.
Yeah.
Pragmatic blocker.
Pragmatic blocker. Yeah.
Yeah, that's totally reasonable.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet. There's no pragmatic blocks on Bitcoin yet, I guess.
Yeah, just 1 megabyte blocks at scale.
There's other things that are being worked on. So there's definitely other ways to scale, but I think we're going to need a combination of all of those.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to go back to that because that could be relevant with respect to what Kosmos thinks is its way of scaling. But let's complete that story. So you're in Bali, you're getting merchants on board, trying to get people to spend Bitcoin and not have to bring in dollars, rupiah, and buy rupiah. Only first I'd heard of that. So rupiah. I haven't been to Bali yet.
Yeah.
And that was 2014?
Yep.
Or going into 2015?
Oh, that was 2015.
Oh, 2015. Okay. So what was the path getting involved more into the crypto industry as far as like working on different projects outside of kind of a campaign to get adoption?
I mean, so I knew that I wanted to learn as much as I could about Bitcoin. And so I just ended up doing a lot of research and writing about it because that's the only way. It's the only way to learn about something is if you teach it.
Right. Very true. Because when you can tell in yourself when you don't know something as soon as you try to teach it.
That's right.
You can almost feel it, and you're like, those words that I just started choosing words that don't actually make sense. You can feel it inside even when you think you know it. And so very true.
Right.
So what was teaching like? Did you host meetups and educate people?
Yeah.
You did? Awesome.
Yeah.
So live meetups, you said you started writing, so do you have a blog that we can follow?
I mean, right now I'm just full-time writing.
Oh, you are full-time writing?
No.
What, for
no.
Kosmos or on your own? A little both.
No, sorry. Okay. I'm like hopping around on the timeline a little bit, but
Sure.
I ended up becoming a reporter. And so I was reporting on the industry stuff, did a little bit of reporting on Decred, and then I did some reporting on EOS, and then, I came across Kosmos when I was listening to the Epicenter podcast.
The guys over out of Berlin, I believe. Right?
Yeah, Brian Crane,
Yep, Brian.
those guys.
Cool. Okay, so you came across Kosmos.
Yeah, I came across Kosmos, and it was just this technical heavy project, and so that was, I was very interested in it for some reason. Really interested in the technical aspects of projects. That's what drew me into it, and then I became their technical writer. And I was the only writer at that time, and in 2017. No one knew what was going on with Kosmos. They had just finished the fundraiser, and so, but no one was talking about what they were doing on the inside, and so they needed a writer to kind of talk about, okay, so like we're not actually building vaporware, this is, we're doing all of this, and here's like the software development update. Here's what we're doing. We're making progress, and finally, people saw that we were able to execute when we launched the mainnet. And
when was mainnet launched? Let's get some details about the chain and what people have been doing on it and how it's different. But yeah.
Yeah, mainnet launch was March 2019.
Oh, just pretty recently.
It was very recent.
Yeah, very recent. That must have been an exciting moment.
Yeah.
How long were you working with the team before mainnet launched?
I joined the team in August 2017. Yeah.
Oh, actually, a good chunk.
Yeah.
Gosh, I'm trying to imagine like working, August, almost a year and a half on a project before it goes into mainnet. Obviously, it's not like these things are easy. Like you don't just kind of snap your fingers and 3 months later you have
No,
a
definitely
unique, very
not.
different blockchain.
Yeah.
But the feeling of being in kind of that pre-release era, both exciting but also like, oh God, when is it going to get out kind of feeling?
Yeah. There was sort of that pressure because the community was constantly asking about, when is this thing going to launch?
Yeah.
Because we unfortunately prematurely announced that we were going to launch in December 2017.
Oh,
and that was
but
a big mistake
it's
because
a year and a half.
Yeah. So
Wow.
so we had that reputation that we were launching like Cosmos is late,
Yeah, you're like announcing an announcement of an announcement type of thing.
That's right.
You're busting a Justin's son.
Yeah. But I mean it wasn't deliberate. Sorry guys.
Right.
Th-
Anyone who's ever written software,
Estimating,
you know
yeah.
that estimates are always off.
Yeah.
Usually in one direction.
And in this case, we were off by a year and a half.
Got it.
Apologies.
So, when you launch and mainnet launches, what exactly exists at that point in time? Because this is a whole platform for people to develop.
Mm-hmm.
But even without people developing and launching their own blockchains, what effectively existed at the point of mainnet launch?
What existed is the Cosmos Hub. So the
Okay.
Cosmos Hub is built using the Cosmos SDK, which runs on Tendermint in production. And so that was the proof of concept that we were trying to validate. And
Got
so
it.
the hub is a hub in the hub and spoke architecture. So,
Okay.
so the Cosmos Hub is meant to be a router of IBC messages across all these different chains.
Got
But
it.
of course, we don't have IBC yet, but IBC is coming up.
So it's not, okay, so IBC,
IBC
stands
is not.
for,
IBC is the Inter-Blockchain Communication Protocol, which
Got it.
Cosmos is a pioneer of. Cosmos is the pioneer of generalized TCP/IP transactions across blockchains.
across blockchain. So right now, or at least when it was launched, you had the hub, which would have spokes, which are different blockchains.
That's right.
But was there a blockchain as well, or was it just the hub? Like, was there a
It's-
chain that
it's-
actually can do transactions at the time mainnet was launched?
Yeah. Mhm.
Oh, there was one. Okay,
But-
so you
but-
already
but-
kind of had like a hub with a spoke.
No.
Oh no.
We have a hub, and the transactions that are occurring on the hub is staking transactions and governance and voting.
Staking and voting. Okay.
Yeah.
But could people actually transact, send, and receive some type of a coin, cryptocurrency on that, or you had to
Yeah,
still
that's-
pull
yeah,
up?
mhm.
Oh, so you could already do that at the point when the hub
Yeah.
was launched.
Yep.
Okay, got
So
it. But
so people are transacting in atoms,
atoms. Okay, let's go over.
and they're staking atoms.
Okay.
And
So Atom is the currency.
Atom is
Or is
the
a currency.
staking token
staking
of the
token.
Cosmos Hub.
Got it. So what's the kind of genesis moment of Atom and how it's created from beginning of time? Let's kind of take that. You went mainnet.
Mm-hmm.
Where did atoms come from at that moment in time?
Well,
Was there a credit that kind of went to maybe token holders from before mainnet, or was
we had a fundraiser.
a fundraiser? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So a fundraiser that was it just kind of a direct hit where you're going to get some Atom tokens at,
Yeah.
once it goes live?
Mhm.
Okay, so simple as that. That's where the initial
Yeah.
block of Atoms came from. And then from there, is it done, or people are staking and then earning more?
People are then staking and earning more. So
Got
we
it.
have inflationary atoms.
Ooh, okay. So inflation, one of
Yeah.
the big key questions around all the different cryptocurrencies, one of the big promises that Bitcoin brought from the viewpoint of kind of, I wouldn't call it non-inflationary currency, but more predictable inflation. So what's the inflation look like of Atoms?
Inflation of atoms fluctuates between 7 and 20%.
Oh, interesting. So it actually fluctuates.
It
It's not that
fluctuates, yeah.
fixed. I mean, Bitcoin's not fixed either, right? It kind of fluctuates, but it kind of has this, it tries to get to a specific amount of inflation, right? The whole 50 coins every 10 minutes and then 25 whatnot halves every few years. What's the kind of target kind of inflation curve on Atom?
So what we're targeting is a network bonded rate. And so if the network, if less than 2/3 of the network is bonded at any time, the supply of atoms increases to
If less than 2/3 is bonded.
Yeah.
Bonded meaning staked?
staked, yeah.
Got it. So if people haven't staked enough, then the supply starts to increase, which
Yeah.
inflates people, which potentially kind of devalues the currency.
That's right. It penalizes people for not
staking.
staking. Yeah.
I see. It's like
So
stake your money, people.
Yeah,
Stake
yeah.
your money or you lose your money.
That's
kind of
right.
thing.
It's
Interesting.
because atoms are meant to be this virtualized representation of GPUs, ASICs, FPGAs, and so they should be staked, right? It's a virtualized piece of hardware that is meant to provide security for the network.
Got it. Because
So
that's
there
what
sh-
it's that's what.
Right. So there shouldn't be liquidity of
I
those
see.
atoms.
Interesting. So its goal being like reduce the liquidity. So
Yeah.
not meant to be like the purpose of transacting is for someone else to give to someone else for them to stake it.
Yeah,
kind of
but
the
it's
goal.
non-custodial.
Of course, right. I mean, to give, I mean, you transact on chain to give to someone else to then
To-
stake it.
yeah, to
And you
then-
can-
to
or
then-
delegate stake. Something. Can you delegate stake?
You delegate stake,
You
yeah.
delegate stake. Okay, cool. Now, going back to the thing that we talked about, you went down to, well, if only we had, pragmatic blocks and scale. I presume, and most chains that have kind of come up with new, different consensus algorithms and architectures after Bitcoin, especially after Ethereum, have usually had this very close in mind. Right, like one of the things you think of, you don't launch a new architecture blockchain where scalability is at or worse than Ethereum or Bitcoin. Typically not. So, what are the key tenets of Cosmos or the Tendermint architecture that solve some of the scaling problems of, say, the closest thing being Ethereum, which is similar to some of the scaling issues that Bitcoin has. So, what would you say are some of the things it does? It says, hey, I think here's our path to achieving scaling where these others kind of have faltered.
So our approach to scaling is called horizontal scalability, in that because we
okay.
have these the interconnectivity between different chains. The idea is that you could create multiple instances of a chain and then have them sync up asynchronously, such that you have multiple chains running your software. And
Running
then-
the same software.
No.
Potentially?
So you could have multiple chains that could hit scale, and then so once one chain
Kind of hit
hits
scale.
capacity, you could spin up another chain for that to then
Absorb some of the bandwidth requirements and whatnot.
That's right. So you could do this in
It's kind of like
unlimited
servers.
amount of times.
So is it kind of like a server? You spin up a server and it kind of hits capacity, then you spin up another server and it can offload some of that capacity.
That's
Although
right.
there's definitely some tricky architecture for them to know when to communicate with each other
Yeah.
to determine what's the state of the system.
Yeah. So
Right.
so that's what interblockchain communication
That's what IBC is doing. Got it. So is there a limit to what on the bandwidth of IBC itself? Because you've got two different blockchains, each of them have their limit. But then when one wants to talk to another, you're kind of affecting each chain. So each chain is affected. So is the limit effectively the limit of both chains?
Yep.
Kind of like,
The throughput of
the
it's
throughput of each
constrained,
one.
yeah.
It's throughput, yeah, exactly. So the communication itself is not constrained, but it's just the throughput of each one. So your hope is that you're not talking across both of them as often as you'd be talking to just one chain.
Right.
Right, you can put a pool of users on one or pool of users on another. So from the viewpoint of apps, I think that actually makes sense. That's how we deploy servers and whatnot. From the viewpoint of cryptocurrency, would you be able to have a crypto that people can transact that somehow exists on multiple chains to help? I mean, this is kind of like sharding, right? In a way,
Yeah.
it's sharding the usage of an application or a currency. So could you have because it is more useful to have, instead of hundreds, but a few smaller tokens, a fewer number of tokens. Can you have one token that effectively exists across multiple chains so that its usage is sharded, or does each chain have its own token? Like we talk about Bitcoin, it's only one chain. It's got issues with block size, whatnot. But if you wanted to create a token that would have a lot of transaction capacity, and it soaked up, say, one blockchain's worth, is it possible to have that same one, increase its capacity by, spreading it across multiple chains? Is that something that anyone's going to talk about?
Eventually you could do that and transfer your token across different chains, but there should always be a source chain, like a source of truth,
For that token specifically?
Yeah.
Got it. So you could, I assume since you can transfer between chains, you could kind of peg it, like make a pegged version of that
Yeah,
main
you
chain
could
onto
start
another
doing
one.
some really weird things with
Got it.
synthetics and peg tokens.
So this actually is not too different, and I think Jack on your team had mentioned this, that it's not too different, but it's more native way of implementing like Ethereum 2.0's like sharding, because you start with that from the ground up.
That's
as
right,
opposed
yeah.
to trying to kind of smack it on the side.
From top down, yeah.
When you've got a live chain that's already got a few $1 billion on it, and suddenly have to change the guts underneath it.
Yeah, you gotta like rip a lot of stuff
Yeah.
out and.
Like they say, a flying plane at Mach 1, trying to repair it and change it while it's flying, which a little bit harder to do when you can kind of think about it from the ground up.
Yeah.
So I see that. So that makes sense. But from the viewpoint, I usually ask the question when people talk about scaling. Ask the question, what exactly is going to improve when the issues with scaling are usually related to like CPU computation, storage, and bandwidth.
That's right.
And so usually I get the answer like, yeah, we're faster, we're more scalable, but none of those three actually get improved in many other blockchains.
Yeah.
They just let them get bigger. They just simply say, well, CPU, we'll just let it cost more CPU, and we'll just let it take more storage, and we'll just let it take more bandwidth. And I've always, for a long time, in studying ETH 2.0, said, well, sharding kind of is the only thing that solves all three. Because every machine doesn't have to do the same CPU computation and have to store all of the data. You can shard it, and this effectively is implementing that concept of sharding, but at a super native level, and that awesome and cool by my regard, and super technical. So the fact that you can kind of handle the questions and the writing necessary to communicate this is awesome, very, very cool. Hats off to the team. Hats off going into mainnet. Coming out of GopherCon, what's next for the team? Where are you guys headed? What's the travel schedule, if any, going into summer and spring?
Next up is ETH Berlin, and then after that would be DevCon.
I think I just saw ETH Berlin. Did I just see ETH Berlin with like a picture of Hasselhoff on the front?
Oh.
Someone confirm. Anyone on the internet, is Hasselhoff going to ETH Berlin? I thought I saw that he actually was, which would have been crazy. Did you see this?
No, actually I didn't see that, but I would not be surprised. Yeah, they get some pretty.
Have you listened to his actual music?
No.
Yeah, that's good. Save yourself. Save yourself. I mean, I was a big fan of Knight Rider growing up in the 80s, but kind of ended there. Well, maybe a little bit of Baywatch. But either way, so ETH Berlin, it is a developer-heavy. Oh, it's ETH too, but you guys are not quite ETH. You're close, similar, targeting the same thing. But okay, so ETH Berlin, another hackathon, more developers. Cool. And when does that happen?
That is happening sometime mid-August.
Mid-August. Okay,
Yeah.
Cool. So keep your eyes out. ETH Berlin. I did hear about the event. Heard it's going to be a good one. And anything after that for you guys?
Yeah, DevCon 5.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Definitely big event. Hard to get tickets. Sell out like in minutes typically.
Yeah, that's difficult.
So, yeah, it is a little bit difficult. But great event. I was there last year and I think the year before. For anyone that's interested in the dApp space, whether ETH or even other projects, definitely check out DevCon. So for myself, for those of you still interested, I will be actually headed over to Asia. I'll be at the Spot conference talking about exchanges over in Hong Kong. That's coming up on Monday. And then headed over to Tokyo for the Bitcoin Cash meetup, which is celebrating the 2-year anniversary of Bitcoin Cash.
Oh,
So be over
that's
there. Yeah, paying with Bitcoin Cash and other cryptos. They've got a whole bunch of merchants all over Tokyo accepting crypto, and so that's always kind of a fun, exciting thing. Kind of like the Bali thing that you're trying to set up. They're
Is that legwork that Roger Ver did?
I think multiple different people. So obviously, I think Roger kind of like nudges a few folks, but they have a really, really strong community of just trying to get merchants on board, independent of Roger himself. But that's travel schedule. We'll also be over at the Toronto Futurist Conference.
Oh,
Probably
yeah.
the same time as ETH Berlin, so there might be a bit of a conflict there, so I won't be able to go to ETH Berlin. Toronto Futurist Conference, and then I'll be teaching a class on mining and forks at the Blockchain Training Conference 2019 in Denver.
Oh, cool.
So check that out. That's end of August, around August 30th. So if you want to learn a bit more about crypto and blockchain, it's a great event. It's hosted by Andreas Antonopoulos and Michael Perklin of Shapeshift. It's not a Shapeshift event, but it's one of his events that he co-hosts with Andreas.
Michael Perklin has some of the best DevCon costumes. Last year he came with a cape. Yeah, it was like this iridescent cape. He was like...
I don't think I saw him at DevCon last year, bummer. But I've seen him at a few other events, Day for Crypto in Denver, and he's got a great place. We got to hang out at his place. But he wouldn't let anybody take photos because he didn't want to get geotagged and posted to know where he lived, which is good. Great OPSEC. Good job, Michael. Anyway, thanks a lot, everyone, for tuning in. Check out our live Q&A again next Friday, 12 p.m. Pacific. And thanks again for joining us, Chjango. And how can people reach you and the Kosmos project?
So follow Kosmos on Twitter on @Kosmos. Follow
You guys
myself.
got the @Cosmos.
Yep.
That's awesome. You actually got the @Cosmos. Okay, and and then yourself?
Myself is Chjango. It's @CHJANGO. You could reach me on Twitter. That's the
That's
best
your main.
place to reach
That's your main place.
I
You
would
deal
say
with
so.
crypto Twitter. You can handle it. Very cool.
I mean, handle
Yep.
it.
And we're at Edge Wallet, @Edge Wallet. Simple as that. That's right. Thanks a lot, everybody. And remember, not your keys, not your crypto.